Welcome to today's deep dive. It's going to be a really interesting one. We're diving into the idea of the introvert's edge when it comes to, well, sales. I know. Sounds a little bit strange at first, right?
It does.
Aren't salespeople supposed to be those, super outgoing, life of the party types?
Right.
Yeah.
The stereotype.
The stereotype, exactly. But we're actually going to be busting that myth today. We're going to be using the introvert's edge, how the quiet and shy can outsell anyone, which is a book by Matthew Pollard. And this book actually lays out a system specifically designed to help introverts like you leverage their natural strengths to actually outperform those, stereotypical extroverted sales stars.
That's so interesting. It really does turn that conventional wisdom on its head, doesn't it? Because you see, Pollard himself was a self-described shy kid. He was even bullied growing up, and he kind of stumbled into sales out of necessity. Ended up selling telecom plans door to door on Sydney Road in Melbourne.
Door to door.
Wow. Yeah, so talk about a challenging first sales gig, right?
Oh, yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah.
But that experience, though, actually sparked a passion for sales in him.
It did, exactly. And through a lot of trial and error, he realized that his introversion, it wasn't actually a liability, it was an asset. And that's how he developed the system that we're going to unpack today.
Okay, so let's jump right into this system. The book outlines 7 key steps, and that very first one is all about setting the stage. Pollard calls it trust and agenda, and he really emphasizes establishing trust quickly. Now, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, isn't building trust important in any relationship, really, not just in sales?
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Trust is the foundation of any strong relationship, but it's especially crucial in sales. When you think about it, you're essentially asking somebody to invest their time, their money, and really their trust in you and the product or service that you're selling. And research actually shows that introverts, who are often perceived as more sincere and less pushy, they can actually have an advantage here.
That makes sense. I guess people are probably more likely to open up to someone that they feel genuinely cares about their needs rather than someone who's just trying to make a quick buck.
Right, exactly. And Pollard highlights some really specific techniques to build that trust right from the get-go, right from the start.
Like that shoes off technique. That one really caught my eye. What's the psychology behind that?
Oh, it's brilliant in its simplicity, really. Just imagine a salesperson coming into your home and immediately asking, "Would you like me to take my shoes off?" It's just such a disarming gesture.
Right.
A sign of respect for their space, their boundaries. And nonverbal cues like that, they often speak louder than words.
Right. It's like you're saying, I'm a guest in your home, not some kind of intruder trying to, force something on you.
Precisely. And it creates this subtle shift in the power dynamic, making the prospect feel more comfortable, more in control. It really taps into those deep-seated social norms that we have around hospitality and respect.
That's so interesting. So it's not really about the shoes themselves, it's about the message that it sends.
Exactly.
And, it reminds me of those studies that have shown how mirroring someone's body language can build rapport. It's like a subtle way of saying, we're on the same level here.
That's a great connection. It really is all about establishing that sense of connection and common ground. And Pollard doesn't stop there. He also emphasizes being upfront about the agenda for the conversation, outlining that clearly.
Right. So just being transparent about what you're going to cover.
Yeah.
What's the reasoning behind that? Does it tie back into building trust as well?
Oh, absolutely. Transparency is key to building trust. By clearly stating what you'll be discussing, you're taking the pressure off yourself and the prospect as well. There's no hidden agenda, no fear of being tricked or manipulated.
It's like you're saying, here's the roadmap. We're in this together.
Exactly.
And that can be really reassuring, especially for someone who might feel a little anxious about the sales interaction,
Absolutely. It creates a sense of psychological safety, which is really essential for open communication. And Pollard even suggests going a step further and actually showing the prospect like a script of what you'll be talking about.
Wow, that's bold. But I can see how that level of transparency could really build that trust. It's like, I have nothing to hide. I'm here to help you.
Precisely. It's reframing the whole sales interaction from this high-pressure pitch to a more collaborative process.
Right. So step 1 is all about laying that foundation of trust and clarity. It's like preparing the soil before you plant a seed. Right.
What a great analogy. And without that strong foundation, even the most brilliant sales pitch won't take root.
Right. This is giving me a whole new perspective on sales. It's not about, being slick or manipulative. It's about building those genuine connections, creating a space where people feel comfortable opening up
And that's where the introvert's natural strengths can really shine. Their ability to listen attentively, to empathize with the prospect's needs, and really build rapport through genuine connection. That can be incredibly powerful in this initial stage.
This is really resonating with me. So you're saying introverts don't have to try to be someone they're not to succeed in sales. They can actually leverage those natural tendencies to create a more authentic and ultimately more effective approach.
Exactly. It's about embracing those qualities that make you unique and really using them to your advantage.
Okay, I'm hooked. But before we go on to step 2, what stood out to you the most about this whole idea of trust and agenda?
For me, I think it's the emphasis on really building rapport early on in the interaction. So you're not jumping straight into the sales pitch. You're taking that time to connect as human beings, establish that common ground, and really build that foundation of trust. And honestly, that can make all the difference.
I completely agree. It's like you're saying, I see you, I hear you, I'm here to help. And that's a powerful message no matter what you're selling.
Precisely. It's really about shifting the focus from just the transaction itself to the relationship.
Okay, I'm ready for more. So let's move on to step 2. Ask the right questions. I'm sensing a theme here. Lots of emphasis on understanding the customer before even trying to sell them anything.
You're picking up on it. This step really taps into that introverted strength of deep listening. It's about moving beyond just that superficial small talk and really getting to the heart of the customer's needs and pain points.
So instead of launching into this pre-rehearsed sales pitch, you're taking the time to understand their unique situation.
Exactly. It's like a doctor diagnosing a patient before prescribing any treatment. You wouldn't want your doctor just to throw a bunch of pills at you without first understanding what was wrong.
No way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what effective salespeople do too. They ask those probing questions to really uncover the true cost of the problem that the customer is facing.
Hold on. Real cost? What do you mean by that?
Pollard actually talks about uncovering not just the financial costs, but the opportunity costs as well, and even the personal or emotional costs of the problem.
So you're talking about like the full impact of the problem, not just the surface level.
Precisely. It's about digging deeper and helping the customer see the problem from this new perspective. And that's where those carefully crafted questions come in.
Can you give us an example? What kind of questions would uncover those deeper costs?
Yeah, absolutely. So instead of just asking, how much are you currently spending on this solution, you might ask, what opportunities are you missing out on because of this problem? Or even, how is this issue affecting your team's morale?
Wow, those are much more powerful questions. They really get to the heart of the matter. And I can see how asking those questions could position you as more of a problem solver than a salesperson.
That's exactly the point. You're shifting the dynamic from I'm here to sell you something to I'm here to help you solve a problem. And that can be incredibly persuasive, especially for introverts who are often genuinely motivated by helping others.
This is fascinating. It's like by truly understanding their needs, you're building the case for your solution before you even mention it.
You got it. You're really laying the groundwork for a compelling argument by tapping into the power of empathy and understanding. And that's a skill that introverts often excel at.
Okay, before we dive into step 3, I have to ask, what stands out to you the most about this whole idea of asking the right questions?
For me, it's the power of curiosity. When you approach that sales interaction with genuine curiosity, a desire to truly understand the other person's perspective, it changes that whole dynamic. It becomes less about just pitching and more about connecting. And that's really where introverts shine.
I love that. It's about being genuinely interested in the person, not just making a sale.
Exactly. And that authenticity can be incredibly disarming and persuasive.
This is really making me rethink everything I thought I knew about sales. So it's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the most perceptive listener.
You've hit the nail on the head. And that's a skill that introverts can really cultivate and master to create a truly compelling sales approach.
Okay, I'm eager to learn more. What's next?
So step 3 is all about making sure you're investing your time and energy wisely. Pollard calls this one qualify the prospect.
Qualify the prospect. So I'm guessing this is about making sure you're talking to the right person.
You got it. It's about making sure that you're dealing with someone who actually has the authority to make a decision.
Right.
Pollard actually shares this hilarious anecdote about accidentally selling a telecom plan to someone who couldn't even legally buy it.
Oh, yeah.
It was a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It really highlights how important it is to ask those qualifying questions early on. Make sure you're talking to the decision maker, because you don't want to waste your time building rapport with someone who ultimately can't say yes.
So how do you How do you go about qualifying a prospect without being too, I don't know, too direct or too aggressive? It seems like it could be a delicate balance.
It is. It is. You don't want to come across as interrogative or, dismissive. Pollard suggests sort of weaving those qualifying questions seamlessly into the conversation.
Okay.
You might ask something like, so who else would be involved in making this decision? Or what's the typical process for approving a purchase like this?
Those are great examples.
You do it.
They just sound like natural extensions of the conversation, not like you're grilling them with a checklist of questions.
Exactly. It's about gathering that information in a way that feels really organic and respectful.
Right.
And, this step is actually really important for introverts because they often really value their time and energy.
Makes sense. Qualifying those prospects early on can save everyone time and hassle in the long run.
Right.
Plus, it shows that you respect their time and you're serious about finding the right solution for them.
Precisely. It demonstrates that professionalism and that genuine desire and that can go a long way in building that trust and credibility, especially for introverts who might be perceived as a little bit more reserved or hesitant.
It reminds me of that old saying, measure twice, cut once.
Yes.
It's better to take the time to qualify your prospects up front than to waste, time and energy on a dead end.
That's a perfect analogy. It's about working smarter, not harder, which I think is something that a lot of introverts can relate to.
Right. Okay, so we've covered setting the stage, asking the right questions, and now qualifying the prospect. What's next on this journey through the introvert's edge?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Step 4 is all about the power of storytelling. Pollard calls it tell stories that sell.
Wait a minute. Stories? I thought we were talking about sales, not like bedtime tales.
I know, it sounds counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But Pollard really argues that stories are one of the most powerful tools a salesperson has.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do stories fit into this whole world of sales?
Well, think about it. People don't buy products or services, really. They buy solutions to their problems.
Right.
And stories are just a brilliant way to illustrate how your solution can transform their lives.
So, he uses that phrase, sell the sizzle, not the steak.
Yeah.
So it's not about, listing off features. You're painting a picture of the benefits, the outcomes.
Exactly. You're helping the prospect really visualize how their life will be better after they use your product or service.
I'm starting to see the light. It's not about bombarding them with facts and figures. It's about connecting with them on an emotional level.
Right.
And, research shows that stories are so much more memorable and persuasive than just dry data.
That's a great point. Stories engage our emotions and they make information really stick.
Right.
And introverts, with their natural sort of thoughtfulness and reflection, they can be incredible storytellers.
That makes sense. They're often good at observing details, understanding nuances, and crafting those compelling narratives.
Exactly. Pollard shares this great example of a piano teacher whose sales really took off after he started incorporating stories into his pitches.
Okay, tell me more about this. What kind of stories was he telling?
Well, so instead of just listing his qualifications, the structure of his lessons, he started sharing these stories about the transformative impact of music on his students' lives. He would talk about how, a shy child blossomed into a confident performer, or how an adult student rediscovered their passion for music after years of, neglecting it.
Oh, so he wasn't just selling piano lessons. He was selling that joy, the confidence, that sense of accomplishment.
Exactly. He was really painting a picture of the possibilities and helping potential students see themselves in those stories.
This is reminding me of something you said earlier about uncovering the real cost of a problem. It's by telling these stories, you're not just addressing the surface level problem, you're really tapping into those deeper emotional needs and desires.
You're right on the mark. It's about connecting with that prospect on a human level and really showing them how your solution can address those deeper needs. And for introverts who are often really attuned to those emotional nuances, storytelling can be such a powerful tool.
This is blowing my mind. So introverts don't have to force themselves to be those, stereotypical, loud, boisterous salespeople. They can leverage their natural storytelling abilities to create a much more authentic and effective approach.
Exactly. It's about playing to your strengths, not trying to be someone you're not.
Okay, I'm completely on board with the power of storytelling in sales. But before we go to step 5, what's your biggest takeaway from this whole tell stories that sell idea?
For me, it's just that reminder that sales is about connecting with people, not just presenting information. And stories are one of the most powerful ways to forge that connection.
I love that. It's about building a bridge, then, between your product or service and the emotional needs of your prospect.
You said it. And that's something introverts, with their natural empathy and insight, can do exceptionally well.
Okay, I'm ready for more. What's next on Pollard's roadmap?
All right, step 5 actually tackles a challenge that many salespeople, especially introverts, might dread. It's handling objections. Pollard's approach here is quite unique. He calls it answer objections with stories.
Answer objections with stories. That sounds interesting. I'm usually tempted to, just jump in and defend my product or service when someone raises an objection.
I think that's a pretty common reaction.
Yeah.
But Pollard argues that it's often more effective to actually disarm those objections with stories rather than just engaging in a back and forth debate.
Okay, I'm all ears. How does this work in practice?
So instead of getting defensive or argumentative, you acknowledge that objection and then share a story that subtly addresses it.
So it's not about, denying the objection. It's about reframing it through a relatable experience.
Exactly. And stories can be so powerful for this because they provide that social proof and relatable experiences, Yeah.
People relate to stories.
Can you give us an example of how this might play out in a real world scenario?
Absolutely. Pollard actually highlights this case study of a commercial real estate firm that dramatically increased their sales by incorporating stories into their pitches.
Oh, wow.
They would actually anticipate common objections like concerns about high fees and then preemptively address them with stories.
Oh, so what kind of stories would they tell?
They would share anecdotes about past clients who had similar hesitations, but ultimately really benefited from working with them. It's like saying, hey, I understand your concern, but look what happened when this other company took a chance on us.
That's brilliant. You're not arguing with them. You're just presenting a different perspective through a relatable experience.
Exactly. And stories can be much more persuasive than just stating facts or figures.
Right.
They tap into our emotions.
Right.
They help us see things in a new light.
This is so insightful. So introverts, they don't have to force themselves to be pushy or confrontational to handle those objections. They can leverage, again, their natural storytelling abilities to disarm those concerns in a much more subtle, effective way.
You're getting it.
Yeah.
It's about using your strengths to navigate those potentially challenging situations.
Okay, before we move on, what's your biggest takeaway from this whole idea of answer objections with stories?
For me, it's that reminder that objections aren't necessarily roadblocks. They're opportunities to actually deepen the conversation and really build that trust.
Right.
By addressing those objections thoughtfully, authentically,
Right.
you can actually strengthen the relationship and move closer to a sale.
That's such a powerful way of reframing it.
Yeah.
So instead of seeing objections as something to fear, you can see them as opportunities to connect
Exactly.
on a deeper level.
And that's where, again, the introvert's natural empathy and understanding. Okay, I'm excited to hear about the next step. What does Pollard have in store for us?
Okay, so step 6 is all about subtly guiding the prospect towards a decision without being, pushy or aggressive.
Right.
Pollard calls this, take their temperature with a trial close.
Take their temperature with a trial close.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What exactly is a trial close?
So it's a low-pressure way to kind of gauge the prospect's readiness to buy without directly asking, are you ready to sign on the dotted line?
So it's like testing the waters, but without making them feel like they're being cornered?
Exactly. It's about subtly nudging that conversation forward while giving the prospect that space to make a decision on their own terms.
Okay, I'm following you, but how do you actually do a trial close? What does that sound like?
Pollard suggests framing it as a choice between options rather than a yes or no decision.
Okay.
For example, instead of asking, would you like to purchase this today? You might ask, would you prefer the basic package or the premium package? Or would you like it delivered to your home or your office? Those are a great example. It's like you're assuming they're already on board and you're just helping them figure out the details.
Exactly. It's a subtle psychological shift that can really make a big difference.
This is so fascinating. It's like a carefully choreographed dance.
Yes.
Guiding them towards a decision without them even realizing it.
That's a brilliant analogy. And it's a dance that introverts, with their natural sort of thoughtfulness and planning, can really learn to master.
Okay, before we move on to that final step in Pollard's system, what's your biggest takeaway from this whole trial close idea?
For me, it's just the emphasis on that respect for the prospect's decision-making process. So you're not trying to force them into anything. You're simply guiding them gently towards a choice. And that's something I think really resonates with introverts who often value autonomy and personal space.
I completely agree. It's about creating that collaborative environment where the prospect feels empowered to make a decision that's right for them. Exactly. And that can be incredibly powerful in building that trust in those long-term relationships.
Okay, I'm ready for the grand finale. What's the final step?
The final step is perhaps the boldest of them all. Pollard calls it assume the sale.
Assume the sale. Hold on a second. Isn't that a bit presumptuous?
It might seem that way at first glance, but Pollard argues that when done correctly, assuming the sale can actually reduce decision fatigue for the prospect. And it creates a much smoother transition towards closing the deal.
Okay, I'm definitely curious to hear more about this. How do you assume the sale without, coming across as arrogant or pushy?
It's all about subtle cues and confident language. You're basically acting as if the sale is already a done deal and seamlessly moving the conversation towards the next steps.
Oh, I see. So you're shifting the focus from if they'll buy to how they'll buy.
Exactly. Pollard gives this great example of a furniture staging company that actually implemented upfront payment by confidently presenting it as their standard process. So instead of asking, would you like to pay upfront? They would say something like, okay, so our standard process is to collect payment before we deliver the furniture. Would you prefer to pay by credit card or check?
Wow, that's a subtle but powerful shift.
Yeah.
You're not even giving them a chance to say no to the payment. You're just streamlining the process.
Right.
Making it feel like a natural next step.
Precisely. It's a little psychological nudge that can make a big difference in closing that deal.
This is such a fascinating approach to sales. So you're saying the way you frame things can have a huge impact on the outcome.
Absolutely. And it's not about manipulation. It's about really guiding that prospect toward a decision that's ultimately in their best interest.
Okay. Before we wrap up part 1 of our deep dive into the introvert's edge, what's your biggest takeaway from these last 2 steps? The trial close and assuming the sale.
For me, it's the reminder that confidence is key in sales, regardless of your personality type. But it's not about being loud or aggressive. It's about being self-assured and really knowing the value that you bring to the table.
And that's something that introverts can definitely develop, especially with a system like this to guide them.
Absolutely. Pollard's system really does provide that framework for building that confidence and using it to create a truly effective and authentic sales approach.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the first half of the introvert's edge. We've covered so much ground, from setting the stage and asking those right questions, to telling those stories, handling objections, and even assuming the sale. But there's still so much more to uncover.
Oh, we're just getting started. In part 2, we'll delve into some additional strategies for introverts in sales, as well as, explore some real-world examples of how these principles can really be applied in practice.
I can't wait to hear more. So be sure to join us for part 2 of our exploration into the introvert's edge. We'll be back soon.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the introvert's edge. Last time we were talking about assuming the sale, and I have to admit, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around that whole concept. It sounds so bold, almost counterintuitive.
It is a bit of a paradox, isn't it? But that's what makes Pollard's approach so fascinating. He's constantly challenging those conventional notions about sales and showing how introverts can actually leverage their natural tendencies to create a more effective and authentic approach.
It reminds me of that quote by Susan Cain, quiet people have the loudest minds. It's like introverts have this hidden power that they can tap into if they have the right tools and strategies.
That's a great connection. And Pollard's system really does provide those tools and strategies, empowering introverts to not just survive, but thrive in that world of sales.
Okay, so let's dive back into their strategies. What else does Pollard recommend for introverts who want to, up their sales game? One of the things he emphasizes is the importance of continuous improvement. So it's not enough to just learn the steps. You have to constantly evaluate your interactions and look for ways to refine your approach.
So it's not about being perfect right out of the gate. It's about being open to feedback and constantly tweaking your process.
Exactly. It's about having that growth mindset, that willingness to experiment and learn from your mistakes. And this is actually something that I think introverts are particularly good at.
How so?
Well, introverts tend to be, more reflective and analytical. They're often good at observing details, identifying patterns, and figuring out what's working and what's not.
That makes sense. So they're not just going through the motions. They're really thinking about each interaction and how they can improve.
Exactly. And that can make a huge difference in their long-term success. It's like fine-tuning a machine. The more you adjust it, the better it performs.
This reminds me of something we were talking about earlier, turning those perceived weaknesses into strengths. It's like that tendency to overthink things can actually be an asset in sales if you channel it in the right direction.
That's such a great point. Introverts often get, a bad rap for being too quiet, too reserved, too analytical, but those qualities can actually be incredibly valuable in sales if you leverage them strategically.
Okay, I'm loving this reframing. What are some other examples of weaknesses that introverts can turn into strengths in sales?
One that comes to mind is the power of indifference.
Indifference. Now that sounds counterintuitive. Don't you need to be passionate about your product or service to sell it effectively?
Of course, passion is important, but Pollard's talking about a specific type of indifference, the kind that comes from having a full pipeline of prospects.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
It's about not putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Exactly.
If you have multiple potential clients, you're not as emotionally invested in any single interaction.
Exactly. And that can actually reduce anxiety and project confidence. If you're not desperate for the sale, you're more likely to come across as relaxed and authentic.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you're saying, scarcity breeds desperation while abundance breeds confidence.
That's a great way to put it. And for introverts who often thrive in environments where they feel prepared and in control, having a full pipeline can create that sense of security. It allows them to approach each interaction with a more relaxed and confident demeanor.
So building a robust pipeline is key for introverts who want to excel in sales. But what about those initial interactions? How can they establish credibility quickly, especially if they're not the type to, brag about their accomplishments?
That's another area where Pollard offers some great advice. He talks about the importance of showcasing expertise and highlighting past successes. But it's not about boasting. It's about strategically sharing information that demonstrates your knowledge and capabilities.
So it's about letting your track record speak for itself.
Exactly. He suggests having a few concise credibility stories ready to share.
Credibility stories. I like that. What would those sound like?
It could be a brief anecdote about a successful project, a testimonial from a satisfied client, or even just a mention of relevant qualifications or certifications.
Okay.
The key is to keep it concise and relevant to the prospect's needs.
So you're not saying I'm the best. You're subtly demonstrating your competence and experience.
Precisely. And for introverts who often prefer to let their actions speak louder than words, this approach can be really effective.
This is reminding me of something we touched on earlier, the idea of turning those weaknesses into strengths.
Yeah.
It seems like Pollard's really encouraging introverts to embrace their natural tendencies and use them to their advantage.
Absolutely. He even talks about how introverts' aversion to pushy tactics can actually be a strength in sales.
Now that's an interesting twist. How so?
Well, think about it. In today's world, people are bombarded with marketing messages, sales pitches. They're often skeptical and wary of anyone who comes across as too aggressive or insincere.
Right.
So an introvert's natural tendency to be more reserved and thoughtful could actually be seen as refreshing and trustworthy.
Right. So their genuine desire to understand the customer's needs and provide value can actually be a major differentiator in a world of, pushy salespeople.
Exactly.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about sales. Being an introvert isn't a disadvantage. It's just a different approach, and it can be incredibly effective.
That's the core message of the Introvert's Edge. It's about empowering introverts to leverage their unique strengths and create a sales approach that feels, authentic and aligned with their values.
Okay, I'm convinced. But before we move on, there's one more area I'd like to explore. Pollard mentions the importance of leveraging marketing to support sales. Can you elaborate on that?
Of course. He talks about aligning your marketing efforts with your sales process. So it's not just about generating leads, it's about attracting the right leads, those who are most likely to be receptive to your approach.
So it's about using marketing to pre-qualify prospects in a sense.
Exactly. And he suggests using marketing to pre-frame expectations and build trust before you even interact with the prospect.
Can you give us some examples of how this might work in practice?
Absolutely. One way is to create content that addresses common concerns or objections. For example, if you know that, price is a frequent sticking point,
right?
You could create a blog post or a video explaining your pricing model and the value that you provide.
So you're proactively addressing those potential roadblocks before they even come up in a sales conversation.
Right. And by showcasing your expertise and providing that valuable information up front, you're positioning yourself as a trusted advisor, not just someone trying to make a quick sale.
That makes sense. And, this approach aligns perfectly with the strengths of introverts.
Yes.
They often enjoy researching, writing, and creating content that, educates and informs.
You're absolutely right. It's about playing to your strengths and really using marketing to create a more seamless and enjoyable sales process, both for you and your prospects.
This is such a fascinating concept. So marketing and sales shouldn't be separate silos. They should work together to create a cohesive and persuasive journey for the customer.
That's a great way to put it. And by integrating those efforts, you're not only making your sales process more effective, you're also creating a more enjoyable experience for yourself.
I love that. So you're saying by working smarter, not harder, you can achieve both sales success and personal fulfillment.
That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? And Pollard's book provides a roadmap for introverts to achieve just that.
This has been an incredible journey through this world of introverted sales. We've covered everything from setting the stage and asking the right questions to telling stories, handling those objections, and even assuming the sale. But there's one more area I'd like to explore before we wrap up this part of our deep dive. The power of turning perceived weaknesses into strengths.
This is a concept that Pollard revisits throughout the book, and it's incredibly empowering. It's about recognizing that those qualities that we might see as disadvantages, they can actually be assets when reframed and applied strategically.
Let's dive into some specific examples. What are some of those weaknesses that introverts can actually leverage to their advantage in sales?
One of the most obvious is their natural tendency towards listening. In a world where people are constantly trying to be heard, a good listener can be incredibly valuable.
So instead of feeling pressured to, dominate the conversation, introverts can use those listening skills to gather information, build rapport, and really truly understand the customer's needs.
Exactly. And that deep understanding can really be the foundation for building trust and creating a tailored solution.
That makes sense. It's like you're saying in sales, sometimes it's better to be interested than interesting.
That's a brilliant way to put it. And it plays right into that introvert's natural inclination to, observe and analyze.
What are some other weaknesses that introverts can turn into strengths?
Well, their aversion to pushy tactics, which we've already discussed,
Right.
can be a major asset in building trust and credibility.
Especially in today's world where, people are bombarded with marketing messages and are skeptical of those hard-selling techniques.
Absolutely. Introverts' natural authenticity and sincerity can really shine in this environment. They can really position themselves as trusted advisors, partners in finding the right solution, rather than just salespeople trying to close a deal.
This is so empowering. So introverts, they don't have to pretend to be something they're not. They can be successful by being themselves.
That's the essence of the introvert's edge. It's about celebrating those introverted qualities and using them to create a sales approach that feels, both effective and fulfilling.
Okay, I'm ready to take on the world. But before we get too carried away, what are some practical tips for introverts who, want to start putting these ideas into practice?
Well, Pollard really emphasizes the importance of preparation and practice. He encourages, readers to develop a structured sales process like the 7-step system that we've been discussing, and to really practice it until it feels natural and comfortable.
So it's not about winging it. It's about having a plan and rehearsing it.
Exactly.
Until you feel confident and prepared.
That's key for introverts. Having that structure can actually reduce anxiety and allow them to really focus on building those relationships and providing value.
Right. He also talks about the importance of building a support system, right?
Absolutely. Surrounding yourself with people who really understand and appreciate your strengths can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
That could be mentors, colleagues, or even just, friends and family who can offer encouragement and guidance.
Exactly. Having that support system can help introverts stay motivated and navigate those challenges that inevitably arise in sales. This has been an incredibly insightful exploration of the introvert's edge. We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding those unique strengths of introverts to developing that structured sales process and even, turning perceived weaknesses into advantages. But before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to touch upon something you mentioned earlier, this idea of marketing as a powerful tool for introverted salespeople. It's not just about generating leads, it's about creating a foundation of trust and expertise, right?
Exactly. And that's where introverts' natural strengths can really shine. They're often really skilled at research, writing, and creating that compelling content that educates and informs their target audience.
It's about using those skills to position yourself as like a thought leader in your industry, someone who genuinely understands the needs of their customers and is passionate about providing solutions.
Precisely. It's about building that, and trust factor long before you even have a sales conversation. And that can make the entire sales process much more enjoyable and effective for both the introvert and the prospect.
I love that. It's about creating a win-win scenario where everyone feels valued and respected.
Exactly. And that's what the introvert's edge is all about. Empowering introverts to leverage their unique strengths to create a more authentic, fulfilling, and ultimately more successful approach to sales.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I'm starting to see the world of sales from a whole new perspective.
I'm so glad to hear that. And I think Pollard's book really has the potential to transform the way we think about, introversion and sales.
Okay, I'm eager to hear more about how these principles translate into real-world success stories. In part 3 of our deep dive, we'll explore some specific examples of introverts who have achieved remarkable results using Pollard's system. Stay tuned because things are about to get really inspiring. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the introvert's edge. We've covered so much ground already, from, understanding the unique strengths that introverts can bring to sales to exploring these really kind of counterintuitive strategies that challenge those traditional sales tactics. But now I'm really excited to see how it all comes together, in real world scenarios.
I think you'll find these examples really illuminating. Pollard weaves in some fantastic stories throughout the book, showcasing how introverts from various backgrounds have successfully implemented his system and achieved some remarkable results.
Perfect. Because for me, seeing those real-world applications really brings it to life.
Absolutely. And one story that I think you'll find particularly compelling is that of Alex Murphy.
Oh, right. Alex was that talented videographer who was struggling to get his business off the ground.
That's the one. He was like a classic introvert, super talented, but really uncomfortable with those traditional sales tactics. He'd spend hours crafting these elaborate proposals only to lose out to more salesy competitors.
I remember that. It sounded like he was putting so much pressure on himself to close every deal, which probably ended up backfiring.
Exactly. He was so focused on winning every single project that it created this aura of desperation, which, as we know, is never attractive in a sales context.
Right. It's like that saying, act as if and you shall become. If you act desperate, you'll likely repel potential clients.
Right.
But if you project confidence and abundance, people are much more likely to be drawn to you.
That's a great insight. And that's precisely what Pollard helped Alex do. They worked on building his confidence and reducing that anxiety by, really focusing on building a full pipeline of prospects.
So that's where that power of indifference comes in.
Yeah.
When you have that healthy pipeline, you're not clinging to each opportunity for dear life.
Exactly. It's like you're saying, hey, if this one doesn't work out, there are plenty of other fish in the sea. And that mindset shift really allowed Alex to relax, be himself, and focus on building those genuine connections with potential clients.
So instead of feeling like he had to force a sale, he was able to shift his focus to, understanding their needs and offering genuine solutions.
Exactly. And that's when his business really started to take off. He went from chasing clients to attracting them.
This is so inspiring. It's like a testament to the power of, aligning your sales approach with your natural strengths.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to be someone he wasn't, Alex embraced his introversion, and he found a way to make it work for him.
That's the beauty of Pollard's system. It's not about trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's about providing introverts with the tools and strategies to really leverage their unique qualities to achieve those remarkable results.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about sales. It's not about being the loudest, most extroverted person in the room. It's about authenticity, empathy, and building those genuine connections.
You got it. And those are qualities that, introverts often embody naturally.
This reminds me of something we discussed earlier, the importance of storytelling in sales. I bet Alex's storytelling abilities played a role in his success as well.
You're absolutely right. Pollard actually emphasizes how Alex started incorporating stories into his sales presentations, really highlighting that emotional impact of his work on his clients. So instead of just listing his technical skills, he would share these anecdotes about how his videos actually helped businesses connect with their customers on a deeper level, evoke emotions, and drive results.
That's brilliant. It's like he was selling the feeling, the experience, not just the technical service.
Exactly.
And for introverts who are often, really skilled at observing details and crafting those compelling narratives, this can be a really powerful tool.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that emotional connection and showing how your work can make a real difference in people's lives. And that's something that resonates deeply with introverts who are often driven by a sense of purpose and meaning.
I'm so inspired by Alex's story. It's such a great example of how introverts can achieve that success in sales by, embracing their unique strengths and really finding a system that works for them.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up our deep dive into the introvert's edge, I want to make sure we highlight those key takeaways for our listeners.
I think that's a great idea. It's been a whirlwind tour through Pollard's system, and it's helpful to distill those core principles.
Okay. So for you, what's that most important message that you hope listeners take away from this deep dive?
For me, it's just that reminder that sales isn't about putting on a mask or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about finding your authentic voice, leveraging your unique strengths, and building those genuine connections with people. And Pollard's system really provides a framework for doing just that.
That's so powerful. It's like you're saying introverts, they don't need to try to fit into some preconceived mold of what a salesperson should be.
Right.
They can be successful just by being themselves.
Exactly. And I think that's a message that really resonates far beyond the world of sales. It's about embracing your individuality, celebrating your strength and finding a way to express those unique gifts in the world.
This has been such an incredible journey. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on both introversion and sales.
I'm so glad to hear that. The Introvert's Edge is a book that can truly change the way you approach not only sales, but, your own unique strengths and abilities.
So if you're ready to unlock your inner sales superstar, I highly recommend checking out The Introvert's Edge. How the Quiet and Shy Can Outsell Anyone by Matthew Pollard. It's a game changer.
And remember, you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most persuasive. Sometimes those quietest voices have the most impact.
That's the perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of the Introvert's Edge. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the ideas that are shaping our world